Hello everyone, I am Fabi Kim Sairayu, and today we are going to talk about the child and adolescent learners and learning principles, specifically the growth and development. So hop on and let's go. Growth and development are continuous lifelong processes that involve changes in physical, mental, and emotional aspects. While often used interchangeably, growth and development have distinct meanings in human life, so let us now dig what it means. First, let's clarify the difference between growth and development. So first, let's have the growth. Growth refers to quantitative changes, things we can measure like height, weight, or number of cells. So meaning increase in size, height, and weight. Also, it is observable and stops when we reach maturity. Growth occurs from conception to early adulthood, then slows down. Development, on the other hand, focuses on qualitative changes or things like personality, intelligence, and social skills. Also, development refers to functional and behavioral changes, meaning it includes cognitive, emotional, and social abilities. And most importantly, development is qualitative, which means it continues throughout life. It's a lifelong process that continues from womb to tomb. Now let's talk about what influences growth and development or its factors. First is we have maturation or nature. This is the natural process of growth determined by heredity or genes. It influences traits like height, complexion, and basic abilities. Next is environmental influences or nurture. This includes experiences, interactions, and learning opportunities that shape development. Example, a child growing up in a stimulating environment may develop better language skills. Now that we are done with the growth and development, let us now talk about the four major domains of development. First is we have physical development. This includes the gross motor skills or large muscles like legs and arms, and fine motor skills or small muscles like fingers and lips. For example, learning to walk holding a pencil or clap hands. Next is social emotional development. This involves self-concept, self-esteem, and relationships with others. It's about how a child feels about themselves and how they interact with people. Next is language development. Language development is divided into two types: the receptive language, or understanding what others say, like listening or reading, and expressive language, or communicating thoughts like speaking or writing. Example, a toddler understanding instructions versus saying their first words. And lastly is cognitive development. This includes thinking, problem solving, memory, and imagination. It is closely linked to language development. Example, a child recognizing shapes or an adult solving a complex problem. So now that we are done to domains, let us proceed to human development. Human development is a lifelong process involving physical, cognitive, emotional, and social changes. So Robert Havigert's 1972 identified specific developmental tasks that must be accomplished at different life stages for a person to grow successfully. And now let's have what these stages are. So first is we have the prenatal stage. Prenatal stage, from the conception to birth. The prenatal stage refers to the period before birth, when a baby is developing inside the mother's womb. This stage involves rapid growth from a single cell to a fully formed baby and the formation of all body features, both internal and external organs, especially the brain. Also, this is when the behavior patterns happens. It's an exciting time when genetics determine sex, physical traits, and inherited characteristics. So we have three periods of prenatal development. First, germinal period, first 2 weeks. This period is the formation of the zygote and its attachment to the uterine wall. Also, this is the period of the development of blastocyst or inner layer of cells which develop later into embryo, and the trophoblast or outer layers of cells which provide nutrition and support for embryo. Next is the embryonic period, 2 to 8 weeks. This is when the zygote becomes embryo. The period of the development of the major organ and also formation of three layers: the endoderm or digestive and respiratory system, ectoderm, skin, nervous system and sensory receptors, and mesoderm or circulatory, muscular and reproductive systems. During prenatal development, the embryo relies on three essential life support systems: the placenta, umbilical cord, and amnion, which plays a vital role in supporting life inside the womb. First, we have the placenta, a disc-shaped group of tissues that acts as a life support system. It allows the exchange of nutrients, oxygen, and waste between the mother and the embryo. The small blood vessels from the mother and the baby intertwine but do not directly join, ensuring safe nutrient transfer while keeping their blood separate. Next, we have the umbilical cord, which acts as the lifeline between the baby and the placenta. It contains two arteries and one vein that transport oxygen and nutrients to the baby while removing waste. This system ensures the embryo gets all the necessary resources for healthy development. And finally, we have the amnion, which forms a protective bag around the embryo. It's filled with amniotic fluid, allows the baby to float and move safely. Next is fetal period that occurs in 9 weeks to birth. The fetal period begins 2 months after conception and continues until birth at 9 months. This stage is when the body and organ systems mature. The fetus develops the ability to survive outside the womb, and by the 4th month, sensory experiences like touch, smell, taste, and sound begin to develop. Next is infancy. Infancy is the shortest stage of development and is marked by helplessness and extreme dependency. It is divided into two phases: the period of the partheniate or from birth until the umbilical cord is cut and tied, and the period of neonate or from the cutting of the umbilical cord to the end of the second week of life. Also, infancy is the development of sensory perception like smell, sound, and taste. Next is babyhood stage. This is the decreasing dependency of babies as their motor control develops. During babyhood, babies become more independent as they develop control over their bodies. This stage is known for developing hand and leg skills, crying, babbling, gesturing, and showing emotions as early forms of communication, and also forming early friendships. Next is early childhood. This stage, often called the preschool years, is a period of exploration, questioning, and socialization. This is the years before formal schooling begins, and the stage of the development of their language and reasoning skills, socialization, and also questioning behavior. Some key aspects include learning to communicate and reason, initial socialization as children begin to interact with peers, and early education preparation. And the developmental task for early childhood includes learning to walk, learning to crawl, learning to talk, learning to eat solid food, and learning self-control and basic hygiene. Next is middle and late childhood. This stage marks a shift from play-based learning to formal education. Here, the child is formally exposed to the larger world and its culture. This stage is when the achievement and social skills develop, and also the fundamental skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic are mastered. Some key highlights includes mastering fundamental skills in reading, writing, and arithmetic, learning about social roles, morality, and values, and becoming more independent and developing self-control. In this stage, we have the following as its corresponding key developmental task: learning physical and social skills, and developing personal independence and a moral system. Next is adolescence. This is the transition from childhood to adulthood, marked by rapid physical changes such as growth spurts, puberty, and voice changes. The development of sexual characteristics like breast enlargement, pubic hair, and deepening voices, a strong desire for independence and forming an identity, and increased abstract and idealistic thinking. Developmental tasks of adolescents are building mature relationship with peers, developing a masculine or feminine social role, accepting one's body image, becoming emotionally independent from parents, preparing for family and marriage, developing a value system for ethical behavior, and learning socially responsible behavior. Next is we have early adulthood. This stage is about adjusting to new patterns of life and responsibilities, such as economic independence or career development and earning income, personal independence like living on one's own or forming relationships, and romantic and family relationships like choosing a mate or starting a family. Developmental tasks of early adulthood are selecting a mate, learning to live with a partner, starting a family and raising children, managing a home, advancing in a career, taking on civic responsibilities, and finding a social group for support. Next is middle adulthood. This is a period of social involvement and personal expansion. This stage is about maintaining career stability, expanding social involvement, and assisting the next generation. People in this phase focus on guiding children into responsible adulthood, career satisfaction, and leadership roles, maintaining healthy relationships with spouses and peers, and adjusting to physical and mental changes of aging. Developmental tasks of middle adulthood are helping children become responsible adults, achieving adult social and civic responsibility, maintaining career performance, developing leisure activities, strengthening marriage and relationships, accepting the physical changes of middle age, and adjusting to aging parents. And the last one is late adulthood. This stage, also known as retirement age, is a time of physical decline and adjustments to reduced strength, reflection on life achievements, adapting to loss like retirement, spouse death, and health changes, and finding new social roles and meaning in life. Developmental tasks of late adulthood are adjusting to decreasing physical strength, managing retirement and reduced income, coping with the loss of loved ones, establishing connections with age peers, adapting to new social rules, and lastly, maintaining a fulfilling living arrangements. So that's all for the growth and development, as well as the stages of human development. So now, let's continue to another topic with another reporter. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. This is Nina May Ingat, and now we are going to bound Eric Erickson's psychosocial theory. Good day, everyone. This is Nina May Ingat, and now we are going to bound Eric Erickson's psychosocial theory. Good day, everyone. This is Nina May Ingat, and now we are going to bound Eric Erickson's psychosocial theory. Here, let's unlock the word psycho and social. Psycho is relating to the mind, brain, and personality. Social, external relationship and environment. So the theory of Erikson is about how our personality influenced by the society. Here, let's unlock the word psycho and social. Psycho is relating to the epigenetic principles. This explains that we develop through a predetermined unfolding of our personalities in 8 stages, meaning it cannot be compared to a box. So, the idea that personality development cannot be compared to a box highlights the dynamic and evolving nature of this process. So, unlike a box, no, which has fixed dimensions and it has a rigid structure, right? So the personality development is fluid and adaptable. So it unfolds in a predetermined sequence of stages where each stage influences the next, allowing for growth, change, and the integration of experiences over the time. So this reflects the complexity of human development, which cannot be confined to a static form or limited framework. So this theory of Eric delved into how our personality was formed and how we believe that the early stages served as the foundation for the later stages. Erickson's theory posits that personality is shaped through a series of 8 stages. So these 8 stages, we will know these stages later. We will tackle this one. So each stages is characterized by a specific conflict or a challenge that individuals must undergo. So Erickson, he believed that the experiences of these early stages is the foundation for later stages of development, right? For example, successfully resolving the conflict of trust versus mistrust in infancy. It establishes a foundation for healthy relationship in the adulthood stage. So each stage builds upon the previous one, meaning that strengths or weaknesses developed in the early stage can significantly influence individuals' ability to cope with challenges in later stages. Thus, Erickson emphasize the importance of these social experiences in shaping one's identity and its personality throughout the lifespan. It is also highlighted the influence of one's environment, particularly on how earlier experiences gradually build upon the next and result into one's personality. It emphasizes that a person's environment plays a crucial role in shaping their personality. It suggests that early experiences accumulate over the time, influencing how individuals develop and also to respond to future situations. Each experience builds on the previous ones, and again, creating a complex interplay between external factors and personal growth, ultimately molding one's character and its behavior. Psychosocial crisis. Each stage involves a psychosocial crisis of two opposing emotional forces. Each crisis relates to a corresponding life stage and its inherent challenges. We have here the syntonic. Syntonic is a positive disposition in each crisis. For example, trust. It refers to a positive disposition or attitude during crisis. It characterizes resilience also. Individuals with a syntonic perspective maintains a sense of optimism and confidence, allowing them to navigate challenges effectively and foster positive relationships. Next one is the dystonic. Dystonic is the negative disposition, for example, mistrust. It is contrast to syntonic. On the other hand, this one denotes a negative disposition marked by feelings such as, yes, the mistrust, and the other one is anxiety. So those person with a dystonic perspective may struggle to cope with crisis, leading to a heightened sense of fear and skepticism that can hinder their ability to engage positively with others and the situation at hand. When a developmental stage is managed effectively, individuals acquire a specific virtue or psychosocial strength that contributes positively to their personality and social interactions. This virtue represents the successful resolution of the challenges and conflicts inherent in that stage, fostering resilience, confidence, and healthy relationships. We have here the first one, malignancy. Malignancy, it involves too little of the positive and too much of the negative aspect of the task. It refers to a condition where there is an imbalance in the psychosocial strength. It characterized by an excess of negative aspects and a deficiency of positive traits. This results in detrimental behaviors such as an inability to trust others, which can lead to isolation and difficulties in forming healthy relationships. So, the best example for this malignancy is a person who cannot trust others. Simply as that. Next is the maladaptation. It is not quite as bad, but it involves too much of the positive and too little of negative. This maladaptation represents a less severe imbalance where there is an overabundance of positive traits and lack of negative aspects. So, this can manifest as excessive trust in others, which may lead to vulnerability and exploitation, as the individual may overlook potential risk or negative intentions in others. So, the best example for the maladaptation is a person who trusts too much. So malignancy and maladaptation is contrast to each other. So these are the positive and the negative. So now we have here the psychosocial theory of development of Erik Erikson. This theory of Erik Erikson's psychosocial development outlines eight distinct stages, the one I mentioned earlier, that individuals navigate throughout their lives. Each stage presents a psychosocial crisis that must be resolved to develop a healthy personality and acquire essential virtues. We have here in the first part trust versus mistrust. It is infancy, from birth to 18 months. In this stage, infants learn to trust their caregivers and the world around them. Successful resolution leads to a sense of security and trust, which failure can result in fear and suspicion. Our virtue in the stage 1 is hope. Successfully developing the trust leads to a sense of hope. Infants who feel secure in their environment are more likely to trust others and have a positive outlook on life. So, in this stage, the maladaptation is sensory maladjustment. If infants do not develop a sense of trust, they may struggle with sensory experiences. It leads to difficulties in processing and responding to their environment appropriately. And for this stage, the malignancy is withdrawal. When infants do not develop trust, so they may withdraw from social interactions and leading them to have a severe isolation and an inability to form relationships later in their life. So, the second stage is the autonomy versus shame and doubt. So it is the toddler years from 18 months to 3 years old. Toddlers begin to assert their independence by making choices, right? So success fosters a sense of autonomy, which failure may lead to feelings of shame and doubt about their abilities. So the virtue of the stage 2 is the willpower or the determination. So when toddlers gain autonomy and make choices, they develop willpower. So this kind of virtue reflects their confidence in their ability to act independently and make their own decisions. The maladaptation in this stage is impulsiveness. So when toddlers are not supported in their autonomy, they may act impulsively. lacking the ability to consider the consequences of their actions, which can hinder their decision making skills. So, the malignancy in this stage is compulsiveness. So, if toddlers are overly, what you call this, restricted in their autonomy, so they may develop compulsive behaviors. So this feeling, it needs to control their environment rigidly and struggling with the flexibility. Next stage is a stage 3, the initiative versus guilt. It is from the preschool years, from 3 years old to 5 years old. So the children start to initiate activities and interact with others. So if we are going to encourage them, they develop initiative. And if we're going to discourage them, they may also feel guilty about their efforts to lead and make decisions. So the virtue of stage 3 is courage or ability to take risk. Children who successfully initiate activities and are encouraged to explore, develop a sense of purpose. So, if we are going to encourage them to explore more, we give them the develop a sense of purpose. So, this virtue signifies their ability to take initiative and pursue their goals. So the maladaptation of stage 3 is ruthlessness. If children are discouraged from taking initiative, right? So they may feel or they may become ruthless in their pursuits, disregarding the feelings of others as they seek to assert control or achieve their goals. Now, here for the stage 3 malignancy is inhibition. So, if children who are discouraged from taking initiative may experience inhibition, they become overly cautious and fearful of taking risk, limiting their personal growth. So we are here to the stage 4, industry versus inferiority. It is from middle childhood from 6 years old until 12 years old. During this stage, children work to master their skills and tasks. Success leads to a sense of competence and achievement to them, which failure can result in feelings of inferiority and inadequacy. So the virtue of this stage is competency. So mastering their skills and also their task fosters a sense of competence. So children who feel more capable and successful may develop this virtue, which instills confidence in their abilities. The maladaptation of this stage is narrow virtuosity. A failure to develop a sense of competence can lead to narrow virtuosity, where individuals may excel in a limited area but lack the broader skills and their confidence. It's necessary for the overall success. So the malignancy in stage 4 is inertia. A failure to achieve a sense of competence can lead to inertia where individuals or the children may feel paralyzed by their perceived inadequacies. So, preventing them from engaging in productive activities that they do. So, here we are going to have the fifth stage, the identity versus role confusion. So, adolescence, 12 to 18 years old, or maybe 20 years old. So, teens are more explore in their identity and sense of themselves. Successful resolution leads to a strong sense of identity, while failure may result in confusion about their role in the society. So the virtue of stage 5 is fidelity. Successfully forming a strong identity leads to fidelity. This virtue encompasses loyalty, faithfulness, and a sense of belonging, helping the individuals stay true to themselves and their values. So the maladaptation in stage 5 is fanaticism. Individuals who struggle to establish a clear identity may become fanatical, rigidly adhering to beliefs or groups as a way to cope with their confusion or lack of self definition. So the malignancy in stage 5 is repudiation. Not reputation, but repudiation. So those who struggle with identity formation may engage in repudiation, outright rejecting aspects of themselves or their backgrounds as a way to cope up with confusion about who they really are. Now, we're going to bound here to the sixth stage. It is the intimacy versus isolation. So it is the young adulthood from 18 years old to 30 years old. So young adulthood seek to form intimate relationships. So in this stage, this can lead to deep connections and love, while the failure in this part can result in isolation and loneliness if they can't achieve the deep connections and love. So the virtue in stage 6 is yes, love. So love is in navigating the challenges of forming intimate relationships, cultivates the virtue of love. So this reflects the ability to connect with others deeply and also to foster meaningful relationships with others. So the maladaptation of stage 6 is promiscuity. In the absence of meaningful intimate relationship, this may occur. Individuals may engage in promiscuous behavior, seeking some superficial connections to fill the void of their emotional intimacy. So that is the maladaptation of stage 6. How about for the malignancy in stage 6? It is the exclusion. So individuals who cannot achieve or who fail to form these intimate connections may resort to exclusion. Why? Because deliberately shutting others out and they fostering an environment of loneliness. So they want to be lonely if they are failing to have intimate connections with others. And also, they have this emotional detachment of themselves. So now let's continue the stage 7. It's the generativity versus stagnation. It's the middle adulthood, 40 to 65 years old. Adults strive to contribute to society, right? And guide the next generation. Success in this stage results in feelings of productivity and care, while the failure in this stage may lead to stagnation and self absorption. So the virtue in stage 7 is caring. So adults who contribute to society and also they nurture the next generation develop the virtue of care. So this signifies a commitment to the well-being of others and a sense of responsibility as an adult. The maladaptation in stage 7 is overextension. Adults who feel the pressure to contribute may overextend themselves, taking on too many responsibilities without finding a balance, and it can lead them to burnout and feelings of inadequacy. So, the malignancy in stage 7 is rejectivity. Adults that do not find ways to contribute may develop rejectivity, wherein they dismiss or disregard the needs of others. They focus solely on their own interest and desires. So, here for the stage 8, last stage of theory of development of Eric Erickson's psychosocial theory is integrity versus despair. It's the older adulthood from 65 years old and beyond. In this final stage, the last stage, individuals or adults reflect on their lives. It's a sense of fulfillment and integrity that leads them to have wisdom, or that leads them to wisdom mainly. While regret and despair can arise from a life unfulfilled. So the virtue of stage 8 is wisdom. So, yes, in older adulthood, reflecting on life experiences can lead them to wisdom, right? This virtue, by the way, embodies the understanding and insights gained from a life well lived and allowing them the what you call this the older adulthood to find peace and fulfillment in their life. So the maladaptation of stage 8 is presumption. In older adulthood, individuals reflecting on their lives may develop presumption, wherein they assume that their experiences are universally applicable, leading to a lack of understanding or empathy towards others' journey. That's the maladaptation of stage 8. The malignancy, by the way, is disdain. In older adulthood, those reflecting on their lives with regret may develop disdain because harboring contempt for themselves and others can lead to bitterness and a lack of fulfillment. So, that is the 8 stages of Eric Erickson's psychosocial theory of development. So, but then again, each psychological crisis or each stage builds on the previous ones, so they emphasize the importance of resolving each crisis to foster healthy psychological development throughout our lives. How about for those virtues? So, those virtues serve as an essential component of the healthy psychological development. It influences us how, as an individual, interact with others or with themselves and the world around them throughout their own lives. So, those also maladaptive outcomes may highlight the importance of successfully navigating each psychological stage, as unresolved crises can lead to significant challenges in personal development and also interpersonal relationships. And lastly, the malignancies that we've tackled earlier, it illustrates the severe psychological consequences of unresolved crises at each level of stages. So it emphasized the critical importance of successfully navigating the psychosocial theory of Erickson's development framework for overall mental health and well-being of individuals. Now, let's have the theory of Sigmund Freud. Psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud is considered to be the most well known psychologist because of his very interesting theory about the unconscious and also about sexual development. Now, let's have the theory of Sigmund Freud. Psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud is considered. So we have here Freud's stages of psychosexual development. First stage is the oral stage. It is from birth until 18 months. So we have to unlock the word erogenous zone. It is the area that needs to be satisfied. So this specific area becomes the focus of pleasure or the needs. So this may be the arms, mouth, and the genitals. In the oral stage, the erogenous zone is the mouth. For example, breastfeeding and sucking on pacifiers. In breastfeeding, mainly, infants experience pleasure and satisfaction through breastfeeding as it is only provides the nourishment, but also they feel comfort and security. And also for sucking on pacifiers, infants also find solace in sucking on pacifiers, which also can lead them or help them to soothe themselves and fulfill their oral fixation. Too much or too little satisfaction can lead to oral fixation or oral personality, as shown in increased focus on oral activities. So, what do we mean of the oral fixation or oral personality? It is a behavior and personality traits that reflect a lingering attachment to the pleasures associated with the mouth, impacting interpersonal relationships and also self perception throughout the life. In oral stage, we have here oral receptive and oral aggressive. Oral receptive is a type of personality which has a stronger tendency to smoke, drink alcohol, overeat, and this type of personality are underfed or also they lack of breastfeed. An oral receptive personality, by the way, is characterized by tendencies that arise from unresolved issues during the oral stage of psychosexual development. It's often due to inadequate feeding experiences, such as what I've mentioned earlier, they are underfed or maybe insufficient breastfeeding in the oral stage. Next one is the oral aggressive. It's contrast to oral receptive because it's a tendency to bite his or her nails or use curse words or even gossips. So if oral receptive is underfed, the oral aggressive is overfed. An oral aggressive personality is a concept linked to Freud's psychosexual development theory, emerging from the unresolved conflicts during the oral stage due to what you call this excessive feeding or overindulgence. Next stage is the anal stage, from 18 months old to 3 years old. The child's focus of pleasure in this stage is the anus. So, yes, the anus becomes the primary erogenous zone or their pleasure. So, during this stage, children derive from pleasure from activities related to bowel control and toilet training. So, the child finds satisfaction in eliminating and retaining feces. The child needs to work on toilet training so that they will know or they will be have an independent to do their job in toilet. So they have to train more in toilet training. So we have here the anal retentive on their anal stage. If toilet training is overly strict for the young, children may become excessively orderly, meticulous, and also stubborn because it's overly strict. So that's the anal retentive. If you train them overly strict, the children may become stubborn. How about for the anal expulsiveness? So anal expulsive, conversely to anal retentive. So if training is too lax, not very overly strict, so the children may develop more carefree. So disorganized or impulsive approach to their lives. So they have this different what you call this training. So the anal retentive is overly strict in training. The anal explosive is too lax in training. The next stage is the phallic stage, ages from 3 years old until 6 years old. So the erogenous zone in this stage is genitals. So during preschool age, children become more interested in what makes boys and girls different to each other. Preschoolers will sometimes be seen fondling to their genitals. We have here the Oedipus complex. Oedipus complex, boys here develop the unconscious sexual desire for their mother. Boys here see their father as rival for their mother's affection. So by the way, this Oedipus complex is named after the Greek mythological figure Oedipus itself, who unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. Freud believed that the resolution of the Oedipus complex is crucial for the development of a healthy adult identity. So, as boys navigate these feelings, they eventually identify with their fathers, leading to the internalization of paternal values and social norms, which contributes to the formation of the superego. The successful resolution of this complex, Oedipus complex, is very essential for the development of mature relationships and also, take note, a balanced personality. If there is Oedipus complex, we have also Electra complex. Electra complex here, if Oedipus complex is for boys' development unconscious, in Electra complex, it's girls may develop an unconscious sexual attraction toward their father. So Electra complex is named, I mean no, yes, correct. Electra complex is named after also the Greek mythological figure Electra itself. That's the name of the Greek mythological figure. It's Electra. So it is who plotted a revenge for her father's murder. This complex reflects a girl's desire for her father's attention and also affection. So the resolution of the Electra complex is considered, what you call it, very crucial for healthy psychological development. As girls navigate these feelings, they eventually identify with their mothers, leading to internalization of maternal values and societal norms, which contributes to the formation of the superego, same of the Oedipus complex, but different in successful resolving the Electra complex because it is essential for developing mature relationship and also well balanced personality. So it's not kind of contrast to each other, only the name, but they have similar here in this part. But then, according to Freud, out of fear of castration and due to strong competition of their father, boys eventually decide to identify with them rather than fight them, right? By identifying with their father, so the boys develop masculine characteristics and also identify themselves as males and repress their sexual feelings towards their mother. A fixation at this stage, by the way, in the phallic stage, is could mainly result in sexual deviances and weak or confused of the sexual identity. So we have here the fourth stage, latency stage. So it is from the ages of 6 years old until puberty stage. It is during this stage that the sexual urges remain repressed. So in this stage, it is characterized by a focus on social interactions, intellectual pursuits, and the development of skills rather than sexual interest. The children's in here focus is the acquisition of physical and academic skills. It is vital for those children as they build the skills and knowledge necessary for later stages of development, settling the groundwork for their future relationships and their adult roles. Boys in this part relate more with boys and girls with girls during in this stage. Children tend to seek out friendships with peers of the same sex. Why? Because it allows them to explore social dynamics and develop camaraderie based on their shared interests and experiences. So, we have here the last stage, which is the genital stage. It's from puberty and then onwards. So, it begins at the start of puberty when sexual urges are weakened. The genital stage marks a significant transition into adulthood, wherein individuals learn to balance their sexual desires with the complexities of interpersonal relationships and societal expectations. Adolescents focus their sexual urges towards the opposite sex, with pleasure centered on the genitals. Adolescence experiences heightened sexual feelings and attractions, and it leads them to an exploration of romantic relationships and also the physical intimacy. At this stage, it marks a critical period of sexual maturation and development of the healthy, intimate relationships, laying the groundwork for the adult sexual and emotional connections. Personality components. Let's first have the id. It operates the pleasure principle. It focuses on the immediate gratification or satisfaction of its needs. So the id is the most basic and instinctual part of the human personality because it operates on the pleasure principle, right? Which emphasizes the pursuit of immediate gratification and satisfaction of our needs and our desires. The id demands instant fulfillment of desires. So these are the actions often impulsive and unrestrained. The id operates entirely in the unconscious mind, influencing us the behavior without awareness. The id's demands can create tension within the ego, which mediates between these desires and reality. So I'll give you some example here. For example is the situation is the immediate gratification. So the id demands instant fulfillment, right, of desires. For example, a hungry child sees a cookie jar in the table and it immediately reaches for a cookie without thinking or considering whether it's mealtime or lunchtime. So if they should ask a permission also. So whatever feels good now is what it will pursue with no consideration for the reality or logicality or practicality in the situation. Now we have here the ego. Emerges during toddler and preschooler years. It operates using the reality principle. It is aware that others have also needs to be met. The ego is a very crucial component emerging during the toddler and preschool years as children begin to navigate their desires and the demands of reality. It operates using the reality principle, right? Which means it seeks to satisfy the id's desires in a socially acceptable and realistic manner. It is also practical because it knows that being impulsive or selfish can really result to a negative consequences later. So it reasons out and considers out the best response to situation. The ego evaluates potential outcomes of actions like focusing on long-term benefits rather than immediate gratification. For example, an individual may want to spend all of their savings on a luxury item. That is the id. But it realizes, or the person realized that saving for the future needs, like the rent, emergencies, is more prudent or very important. So that is the ego. Let's have here the third, the superego. Near the end of the preschool years, in this stage is the end of the phallic stage or the superego develops. It embodies a person's moral aspect and operates on the morality principle. So the superego is a key component which represents the moral aspect of an individual's personality. It is also develops children internalize societal norms, values, and parental guidance. For example, moral guidance, right? The superego embodies a person's conscience, guiding behavior based on moral standards and ideals, right? Here, a situation. A person feels guilty for lying, as their superego reminds them of the value of honesty. So it is likened to conscience because it exerts influence on what one considers right or wrong. So the superego is often likened to conscience because it serves as the moral compass of an individual's personality. It influences us the perception of right and wrong, and it also embodies internalized societal norms and values guiding behavior that based on the ethical standards. So for example, the superego reflects the teachings and expectations of parents and society, shaping one's understanding of ethical behavior. A situation is here: a child raised with strong values about kindness and may feel compelled to assist others, reinforcing their moral beliefs. So that's the two examples of the superego for us to deep meaning the superego. So now let's going to have the topographical model. So according to Freud, he believes that most of what influences us is our unconscious. And he believed that the unconscious mind is like a vast reservoir that holds thoughts, memories, desires, and feelings that are not immediately accessible to our conscious awareness. And this is also includes repressed memories, unresolved conflicts, and instinctual drives. So here, the first one is the unconscious. So in the Oedipus and Electra complex earlier, they are both buried down into the unconscious, out of our awareness due to the extreme anxiety that they've caused. So the Oedipus and Electra complexes are the psychological concepts in Freud's theory that mainly describes the intense emotions and desires experienced during the phallic stage of development. So these complexes involves unconscious sexual attraction towards the opposite sex parent and rivalry with the same sex parent. Due to the extreme anxiety and conflict these feelings can evoke, they are often repressed and buried deep within the unconscious mind. But then, they still influence our thinking, feeling, and doing in perhaps dramatic ways. So, in here, I'll give you example and then a scenario when it comes to influence on behavior, right? So even though we are not consciously aware of these unconscious elements, they can significantly influence our behaviors and emotions. For example, scenario like someone might feel anxious in a certain situation, right, without understanding why. So this anxiety could stem from repressed memories or unresolved issues stores in the unconscious. So now, if we have the first one, the unconscious, we have also the conscious. So all that we are aware of are stored in our conscious mind. However, our conscious mind, by the way, only comprises a very small part of who we are. So that in our everyday life, we are only aware of a very small part of what makes up our personality. So most of what we are is hidden and out of reach. The conscious mind represents only a small fraction of our overall psyche, encompassing the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions we are actively aware of at any given moment. While it plays a vital role in our daily functioning and also decision making, it is also important to recognize that the conscious mind is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the understanding our full personality. So here, the third one is the subconscious. In this part of us, we can reach if promoted, but it is not in our active conscious. It is right below the surface, but still hidden somewhat unless we search for it or we see for it. So the subconscious serves as a repository for memories and experiences that are not currently being thought about, but we can recall when we needed it. So this includes both positive and negative experiences that really shape our perceptions and behaviors. For example, a skill learned in childhood, like riding a bike, may not be actively thought about until the individual decides to ride again, at which the point subconscious memory can guide their actions. So that's the best example of the subconscious. So now the last one, and we're going to have finished in this part for the Freud's theory, is the non-conscious. So all that we are not aware of, this is the non-conscious. All that have not experienced and all that have not been made part of our personalities, that is the non-conscious. So this one encompasses all the aspects of the mental functioning that remain completely outside of our awareness, including the thoughts, memories, experiences that have not been integrated into our conscious awareness or our personality. So here, I'll give you example like the repressed elements. So it may also hold repressed thoughts and feelings that have been pushed out of awareness but are not actively processed or accessible. So these can include traumatic experiences or emotions that an individual has not confronted.
Good day, everyone. I am Hershey Ladra. Today, we're diving into how children think and learn. Ever wondered why kids see the world differently than adults? Well, let's explore the fascinating world of cognitive development theory through the lens of Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget is a Swiss psychologist, and his groundbreaking work on cognitive development emphasized that he focused on how children's thinking processes evolve. Now, let's tackle first the basic cognitive concepts. Here we have the first one, the schema. The cognitive structure by which individuals intellectually adapt to or organize their environment. A schema is like a filing cabinet. Imagine a filing cabinet in your mind. That's essentially what a schema is. It's a mental framework or concept that help us organize and interpret information. Think of it as a way to understand and create meaning from our experiences. So an example for this one is a child. A child might have a schema for a dog. Furry, four legs, barks. When they see a cat, it might initially fit into their dog schema. Now next we have the assimilation, the process of fitting new experience into an existing created schema. Now assimilation is like fitting in. Assimilation is like adding new file to an existing folder in your filing cabinet. It's when we take new information and fit it into our existing schemas. Now let's continue the dog and cat example. If the child sees a cat and calls it a dog, they're assimilating the cat into their existing dog schema. Next, we have the accommodation, the process of making new schema. All right, so accommodation is like creating new. But if the new information doesn't quite fit, that's where accommodation comes in. It's like creating new folder or changing an existing one to accommodate the new information. When the child learns that a cat meows and is different from a dog, they might create a new schema for a cat or modify their dog schema. Next, we have the equilibrium, achieving proper balance between assimilation and accommodation. So, equilibrium is like the balance. Equilibrium is the process of finding balance between assimilation and accommodation. We strive for mental equilibrium. When our existing schemas can handle new information or the assimilation, we're in a state of equilibrium. But when we encounter something that doesn't fit, we experience disequilibrium, which motivates us to accommodate. So the disequilibrium leads to the child changing the schema. Okay, so now let's have the next one, the stages of cognitive development. So here are the stages of cognitive development. Piaget proposed that children progress through four distinct stages of cognitive development, each characterized by different ways of thinking. Now let's have the first one, the sensory motor stage, or the birth to 2 years old. So in here, stage when a child initially reflexive in grasping, sucking, and reaching becomes more organized in his movement and activity. So this is the first stage where infants learn about the world through their senses and motor actions. Think, touching, tasting, seeing, hearing, and moving. Initially, the child is reflexive in grasping, sucking, and reaching, then becomes more organized in movement. And a key achievement in this stage is object permanence, the understanding that objects continue to exist even when they're out of sight. So you can demonstrate this by hiding a toy and showing how a baby will eventually look for it, understanding it still exists. Next, we have the pre-operational stage, or the 2 to 7 years. Preschoolers represents the world symbolically. So in here, we have the branches, or like under the pre-operational stage. And what are these? First, under the pre-operational stage, we have the symbolic function, or the symbolic function, it is the ability to represent objects and events. So in here, preschoolers starts to represent the world symbolically. This means they can use symbols like words or images to stand for objects and events. An example for this one is like a child pretending a banana is a phone. Next, we have the egocentrism, the tendency of a child to only see his point of view and assume that everyone else has his same point of view. Egocentrism is in here. Children in this stage have difficulty seeing things from other people's perspectives. They tend to assume everyone sees the world the same way they do. An example for this one is like a child covering their eyes thinking you can't see them. Next, the third one, we have the centration, the tendency of the child to only focus on one thing or event and exclude other aspect. So in here, children tend to focus on only one aspect of a situation at a time, ignoring other relevant features. An example for this one, focusing only on the height of water in the glass, not the width when comparing amounts. Next, we have the lack of conversation, the inability to realize that some things remain unchanged despite looking different. So in here, lack of conversation, they don't understand that the amount of something stays the same even if its appearance changes. So, for example, thinking there's more water in a tall, thin glass than a short, wide one, even if it's the same amount. All right. And next, we have the uh, next to the lack of conversation is the irreversibility. It is still under the pre-operational stage. Irreversibility. Pre-operational children still have the inability to reverse their thinking. Irreversible, irreversibility. They can't mentally reverse a sequence of events. For example, if you show them 2 2 plus 5 equals 7, they can't understand that 7 minus 2 equals, I mean, 7 minus 5 equals 2. So if you show them 2 plus 5 equals 7, they can't understand that 7 minus 5 equals 2. Next, we have the animism, the tendency of the child to attribute human-like traits to inanimate objects. So in here, animism, they attribute human-like qualities to inanimate objects. For example, thinking a toy has a feelings like that. Like, like they treat the toy as if the toy also have feelings or emotion. Next, we have the realism. Realism believing that psychological events such as dreams are real. So in here, believing that psychological events such as dreams are real. For example, a child thinking that a monster in their dream is under their bed, like that. Next, we have the artificialism, the belief that natural events are man-made. For example, a child thinking that people make the rain. So it is the natural event, but the child believes that it is a man-made, even if it's just a natural event. Next, we have the last but not the least, we have the transductive reasoning, errors in cause-effect relationship. So, in transductive reasoning, they make connections between unrelated events. For example, a night time. So, it's a night time, so I must go to sleep, like that. Next, we have the third one, the concrete operational stage, the 7 to 11 years. This stage is characterized by the ability of the child to think logically, but only in terms of concrete objects, covers the elementary school years. So in under the concrete operational stage, we have the decentering, the ability of the child to perceive the different features of objects and situation. So in decentering, children can now consider multiple aspects of situation opposing of concentration. Next, we have the reversibility, the ability of the child in follow that certain operations can be done in reverse. So in here, they understand that actions can be reversed. So it is basically opposite of irreversibility. And next to it is the conservation, the ability to know that certain properties of objects like numbers, mass, volume, or area do not change even if there is a change in appearance. So in conservation, they grasp that quantities remain the same despite changing in appearance, like that. Next, we have the seriation. Seriation is the ability to arrange things in a series based on one dimension, such as weight, volume, size, and many more. So in here, they can arrange objects in a logical order, like by size or by weight, and many more. Next, we have the classification, the ability to group or classify things according to one dimension or aspect. So in here, they can group objects rather based on shared characteristics like that. Then next one, we have the inductive reasoning, from specific to general. So in here, reasoning from specific observations to general principles like that. Next, we have the fourth one, which is the formal operational stage, which is the 11 years and above. So thinking becomes more logical. They now solve abstract problems and can hypothesize. So under for the fourth one, the formal operation stage, first we have the hypothetical reasoning, the ability to come up with different hypotheses about the problem and weigh data to make judgment. So in here, they can think abstractly and consider hypothetical situations. Next, we have the analogical reasoning, the ability to perceive the relationship in one instance and use that relationship to narrow down possible answers in similar problems. So in here, it is the ability to perceive the relationship in one instance and use that relationship to narrow down possible answers in similar problem. And next, we have the deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is the ability to think logically by applying a general rule to a particular situation. It's like reasoning from general principles to a specific conclusion. Next, we have all right, since we're done with the four stages of cognitive development, let's proceed now to Lev Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. And alright, so let's break down this section. So let's focus on the Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. Sociocultural theory. So the key theme of Vygotsky theory is that social interaction plays a very important role in cognitive development. So it states here that the social interaction plays a crucial role in cognitive development. Vygotsky emphasized that learning is a social process. Next, social interaction and culture are two central factors in cognitive development. So these are central to cognitive development. Children can learn through interacting with others and within their cultural context. And another one, we have the language is also another factor in the cognitive development. It opens the door for learners to acquire knowledge that others already have. It serves a social function but also has an important individual function. So language is a powerful tool, right, for cognitive development. It allows children to acquire knowledge from others and serves both social and individual function. And next to it, we have the private speech, a form of self-talk that guides the child's thinking and action. Self-talk, all right, so in here, self-talk that guides a child's thinking and action. It helps them regulate their thoughts. Next to it, we have the Zone of Proximal Development, or the ZPD. So, is the difference between what a child can accomplish alone and what can accomplish with guidance. So, this is what the zone of proximal development is. And the word zone represents a learning opportunity where a knowledgeable adult, such as a teacher or parent, or more advanced peer can assist the child's development. So in here, so it's the difference between learning alone and learning with a guidance. So this is the gap. This is the gap between what a child can do independently and what they can achieve with guidance from a more knowledgeable other, or MKO. Next, we have so in here we have the more knowledgeable others, or MKO. The competent adult, or a more advanced peer. So, a more advanced peer who can provide guidance and support. Next, we have the scaffolding. Scaffolding is the support or assistance that lets the child accomplish a task he cannot accomplish independently. So in here, guidance is a very important matter, and the scaffolding should involve judicious assistance given by the adult or peer so that the child move from the zone of actual development to the zone of proximal development. So in here, it is the support. Scaffolding is the support provided by the MKO, or the more knowledgeable other, to help a child accomplish a task they cannot do independently, and it involves providing assistance in a way that allows the child to move from their current level of development to ZPD. What is ZPD again? Zone of proximal development. Very good. All right, next to it is when the MKO scaffolds, the process moves in 4 levels. Now, what are these 4 levels? So we have the first one, I do, you watch, which means modeling. I do, you watch. That means modeling. For the second one, we have the I do, you help. I do, you help. And this means assistance. And for the third one, you do, I help. And this means guidance. You do, I help. This means guidance. Next, we have you do, I watch. You do, I watch. This means independence. And next, we have what is the difference between Vygotsky's social-cultural theory and Piaget's cognitive development theory? So in Piaget, more individual in focus. So, and in Vygotsky, more social in focus. So, which means in Piaget, more individual, focusing on universal stages of cognitive development, while Vygotsky focused more social, emphasizing the role of culture and social interaction. And when we talk about stages, in Piaget believe that there are universal stages of cognitive development. So Piaget proposed universal stages, while on the other hand, Vygotsky did not propose stages but emphasized on cultural factors in cognitive development. So therefore, Vygotsky did not propose stages but emphasized continuous development. And for the language, we have in Piaget did not give much emphasis on language, while on the other hand, Vygotsky stressed the role of language in cognitive development. So when we talk about language, Piaget did not give much emphasis on language. However, on the other hand, Vygotsky stressed the crucial role of language in cognitive development. Alright, so now let's move on to the Kohlberg's Moral Development Theory by Lawrence Kohlberg. So in here, in this theory, it is based on the work of Piaget and John Dewey, which focus on the moral reasoning and development through moral dilemmas. Okay, so in here, Kohlberg studied moral reasoning and development with much of his work based on that of Piaget and John Dewey. So as what I have just said earlier, so it is based on the work of Piaget and John Dewey, and it focuses on the moral reasoning development through moral dilemmas. So in here, we have the Kohlberg stages of moral development. Level 1, or the pre-conversional morality, we have that people at this stage do not really understand the conventions or rules of a society. So in here, stage 1, actions are judged based on whether they lead to punishment or reward. And in number 2, it is obeying rules and exchanging favors are judged in terms of the benefits to the individual. And next level, we have the conventional. So in here, people at this stage conform to the conventions, rules of society. And in this stage, stage 3, ethical decisions are based on concern for or the opinions of others. And then stage 4, earlier stage 3 and now stage 4, right behavior consists in doing one's duty, showing respect for authority, and maintaining the given social order for its own sake. So it's like following the law and order for a peaceful and more organized society. And next, we have the level 3, the post-conventional, the moral principles that underlie the conventions of a society are understood. So in here, it is more disciplined people, like more disciplined individual. Stage 5, the social contract orientation, like rules and laws represent agreements among people about behavior benefits society. Rules can be changed when they no longer meet society's need. Alright, so in here it is more organized and disciplined. And the stage 6, right and defined by the decision of the conscience in accord with self-chosen ethical principles appealing to logical comprehensiveness, universality, and consistency. So in here, an individual is like a more responsible individual, more ethical individual, like already know the rules and regulation of the society and being and adopting the good citizenship of an individual in the society. Alright, so next we have the metacognition by John Flavel. So what is the metacognition by John Flavel? We have the thinking about thinking and learning how to learn. So it is the strategy to use about something. So metacognition by John Flavel, like it's a thinking about one's own thinking processes and enhancing learning and problem solving skills. So it is understanding one's cognitive strength and weaknesses, the nature of task, and effective learning strategies. And in here, under the metacognition, we have the 3 categories, the categories of metacognitive knowledge. And what are these 3 categories? First, we have the person variable. It refers to knowledge about how human beings learn and process information, as well as individual knowledge of one's own learning process. So in here, understanding one's own cognitive abilities and limitations as well as those of others. For example, recognizing you learn better visually, knowing your memory span is short. Alright, so number 2, we have the task variables. Include knowledge about the nature of the task as well as the type of processing demands that will place upon the individual. So in here, understanding the nature of the task and its demands, including difficulty level and acquired effort. For example, recognizing a topic is complex and requires more study time, right? Knowing an essay requires more planning than a short answer. And we have the number 3, the strategy variables, which involves awareness and the awareness of the strategy you are using to learn a topic and evaluating whether this strategy is effective. So in here, understanding and applying effective learning strategies and evaluating their effectiveness. For example, using a mnemonic device for memorization, summarizing key points, and self-testing like that. And under the strategy variables, we have 2. First, we have the meta attention, the awareness of specific strategies so that you can keep your attention focused on the topic or task. So consciously directing and maintaining focus on relevant information. That is what meta attention. And next one, we have the mata. If earlier the meta, now we have the mata memory. Your awareness of memory strategies that work best for you. So in here, understanding and using memory strategies to improve storage and retrieval of information. Okay, all right. And now, okay. So I think that's all for my part. And let's welcome the next presenter. Thank you so much.
So, good day everyone. Today, let's talk about behaviorism. Behaviorism, it emphasizes conditioning behavior and altering the environment to elicit selected responses from the learner. First of all, it is important to note that behaviorism is also known as behavioral psychology. Behaviorism is a theory of learning which states that all behaviors are learned through the interaction with the environment through the process we call as conditioning. So behavior, it is simply a response to a particular stimulus. For this reason, behaviorism is only concerned with observable stimulus-response behavior, as they can be studied in a systematic and observable manner. Now, let's proceed to the father of behaviorism, which is John Watson. So the behaviorist movement began in 1913 when John B. Watson wrote an article called and entitled it Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It, which set out a number of underlying assumptions regarding methodology and behavioral analysis. The basic assumption in behaviorism is that all behavior is learned from the environment. So this explains why behaviorism emphasizes the role of environmental factors to influence behavior to the near exclusion of innate or inherited factors. This amounts essentially to a focus on learning. Hence, for the behaviorist, we learn new behavior through classical or operant conditioning, or collectively known as the learning theory. So later on, we're going to discuss about the classical and operant conditioning. The Little Albert experiment. Watson applied classical conditioning in his experiment concerning Albert, a young child, and a white rat. So John B. Watson famously claimed that if he were to be given a dozen healthy infants, he could shape them into anything: doctors, lawyers, beggars, or thieves. regardless of their background or genetic predispositions. The Little Albert experiment was a famous psychology experiment conducted by behaviorist John B. Watson. So previously, Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov had conducted experiments demonstrating the conditioning process in dogs. Watson took Pavlov's research a step farther by showing that emotional reactions could be classically conditioned in people. The experiment's participant was a child that Watson called Albert B, but is known popularly today as Little Albert. When Little Albert was 9 months old, Watson exposed him to a series of stimuli including a white rat, a rabbit, a monkey, mask, and burning newspapers and observes the boy's reaction. At the experiment's outset, the little boy showed no fear of any object he was shown. What Watson did next changed everything. The next time Albert was exposed to the rat, Watson made a loud noise by hitting a metal pipe with a hammer. So naturally, the child began to cry after hearing the loud noise. After repeatedly pairing the white rat with loud noise, Albert began to expect a frightening noise whenever he saw the white rat. Soon, Albert began to cry simply after seeing the rat. Watson wrote, the instant the rat was shown, the baby began to cry. Almost instantly he turned sharply to the left, fell over on his left side, raised himself on all fours, and began to crawl away so rapidly that he was caught with difficulty before reaching the edge of the table. So it's a textbook example of classical conditioning works. In some cases, these frightening experiences can cause a lasting fear, such as with phobias. Connectionism by Edward Lee Thorndike, the father of behavior psychology, defined teaching as arranging the classroom to enhance desirable connections and associations, defined learning as habit formation. So connectionism, the learning theory of Thorndike, represent the original SR, or the stimulus response framework of behavioral psychology. Learning is the result of associations forming between stimuli and responses. Such associations or habits become strengthened or weakened by the nature and frequency of the SR pairings. The paradigm for SR theory was trial and error learning, in which certain responses come to dominate others due to rewards. So the hallmark of connectionisms, like all behavioral theory, was that learning could be adequately explained without referring to any unobservable internal states. So Thorndike theory consists of three primary laws. First is the law of effect, or the responses to a situation which are followed by a rewarding state of affairs will be strengthened and become habitual responses to that situations. The second one is the law of readiness. A series of responses can be chained together to satisfy some goal, which will result in annoyance if blocked. And the last one is the law of exercise. So connections become strengthened with practice and weakened when practice is discontinued. Now let's talk about the classical conditioning, or also known as respondent conditioning. It refers to a form of learning that occurs through the repeated associations of two or more different stimuli. So the proponent of it was Ivan Pavlov. Ivan Pavlov received the Nobel Prize winner in 1904 for his work on digestion. In his famous experiments with dogs, he showed that the desired response can be elicited when paired repeatedly with a stimulus. So, Classical conditioning, it was discovered by the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov. It is a type of unconscious or automatic learning. This learning process creates a conditioned response through associations between an unconditioned stimulus and a neutral stimulus. So in simple terms, classical conditioning involves placing a neutral stimulus before a naturally occurring reflex. One of the best-known examples of classical conditioning is Pavlov's classic experiments with dogs. So in these experiments, the neutral signal was the sound of a tone and the natural occurring reflex was salivating in response to food. So by associating the natural stimulus, which is the sound or the bell, with the unconditioned stimulus, which is the food, the sound of the bell alone could produce a salivation response. Although classical conditioning was not discovered by a psychologist, it has had a tremendous influence over the school of thought in psychology known as behaviorism. So behaviorism, as we all know, it assumes that all learning occurs through interactions with the environment and the environment shapes behavior. Now let's talk about the four key elements to describe the process of classical conditioning. So first we have here the unconditioned stimulus. Any stimulus that consistently produces a particular naturally occurring automatic response. So an unconditioned stimulus is a stimulus or trigger that leads to an automatic response. So if a cold breeze makes you shiver, for instance, the cold breeze is an unconditioned stimulus. So it produces an involuntary response, which is the shivering. Next one is the unconditioned response. So the process that occurs automatically when the UCS or the unconditioned stimulus is presented. So an unconditioned response is an automatic response or a response that occurs without thought with an unconditioned stimulus is present. So if you smell your favorite food and your mouth starts to water, the watering is what we call as the unconditioned response. Okay, so the third one is the conditioned stimulus. So the conditioned stimulus, the stimulus that is neutral at the start of the conditioning process and does not normally produce the UCR or the unconditioned response. So a conditioned stimulus is a stimulus that was once neutral or didn't trigger a response but now leads to a response. So if you previously didn't pay attention to dogs but then got bit by one and now you feel fear every time you see a dog, the dog has become a conditioned stimulus. Next one is the conditioned response or the learned response produced by the CS. So conditioned response, it is a learned response or a response that is created where no response existed before. So going back to the example of being bit by a dog, the fear you experience after the bite is what we call as the conditioned response. Now let's proceed to the key processes in classical conditioning. So behaviorists have described a number of different phenomena associated with classical conditioning. Some of these elements involve the initial establishments of the response, while others describe the disappearance of a response. So here is the first one, which is the acquisition. Acquisition, the overall process during which the organism learns to associate two events. Acquisition is the initial stage of learning when a response is first established and gradually strengthened. So during the acquisition phase of classical conditioning, a neutral stimulus is repeatedly paired with an unconditioned stimulus. So as you may recall, an unconditioned stimulus is something that naturally and automatically triggers a response without any learning. So after an association is made, the subject will begin to emit a behavior in response to the previously neutral stimulus, which is known as a conditioned stimulus. So it is at this point that we can say that the response has been acquired. Once the response has been established, you can gradually reinforce the response to make sure the behavior is well learned. Next, we have the extinction, the gradual decrease in the strength or rate of a CR that occurs when the UCS is no longer presented. So extinction is when the occurrences of a conditioned response decrease or disappear. So in classical conditioning, this happens when a conditioned stimulus is no longer paired with an unconditioned stimulus. So for example, if the smell of food, the unconditioned stimulus, had been paired with the sound of a whistle, the conditioned stimulus, the sound of the whistle, would eventually come to evoke the conditioned response of hunger. However, if the smell of food were no longer paired with a whistle, eventually the conditioned response, which is the hunger, would disappear. Okay, so next one is we have the spontaneous recovery, the reappearance of a CR when the CS is presented, following a rest period after the CR appears to have extinguished. So the spontaneous recovery, sometimes a learned response can suddenly reemerge even after a period of extinction. That is the spontaneous recovery. So for example, imagine that after training a dog to salivate to the sound of a bell, you stop reinforcing the behavior and the response becomes extinct. So after a rest period during which the conditioned stimulus is not presented, you ring the bell and the animal spontaneously recovers the previous learned response. So if the conditioned stimulus and unconditioned stimulus are no longer associated, extinction will return very rapidly after a spontaneous recovery. Next one is the stimulus generalization. So the tendency for another stimulus to produce a response that is similar to the CR. So stimulus generalization is the tendency for a conditioned stimulus to evoke similar responses after the response has been conditioned. So for example, if a dog has been conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell, the animal may also exhibit the same response to a sound that's similar to the bell. So in John B. Watson's famous Little Albert experiment, for example, a small child was conditioned to fear a white rat. So the child demonstrated stimulus generalization by also exhibiting fear in response to other fuzzy white objects, including stuffed toys and Watson's own hair. Next one is, or the last one, is the stimulus discrimination. Stimulus discrimination occurs when a person or animal responds to the CS only but not to any other stimulus that is similar to the CS. So discrimination, or the stimulus discrimination, it is the ability to differentiate between a conditioned stimulus and other stimuli that have not been paired with an unconditioned stimulus. So for example, if a bell tone were the conditioned stimulus, discrimination would involve being able to tell the difference between the bell tone and other similar sounds. Because the subject is able to distinguish between these stimuli, they will only respond when the conditioned stimulus is presented. Now let's talk about operant conditioning by B.F. Skinner or Burrhus Frederick Skinner. One should focus on the external observable causes of behavior. So, operant conditioning was first described by behaviorist B.F. Skinner, which is why you may occasionally hear it referred to as Skinnerian conditioning. As a behaviorist, Skinner believed that it was not necessary to look at internal thoughts and motivations in order to explain behavior. Instead, he suggested we should look only at the external observable causes of human behavior. So we all engage in behaviors that we know will lead to good outcomes. We also tend to avoid behaviors that we know will have negative consequences. So it makes sense that being rewarded for something makes you want to do it more often, and being punished makes you want to do it less. So this type of learning is what behavioral psychologist B.F. Skinner dubbed as operant conditioning, and it can have a powerful effect on our everyday behavior. So it is a learning method that employs rewards and punishments for behavior. Through operant conditioning, an association is made between a behavior and the consequences, whether it can be a negative or positive for that behavior. So, for example, when lab rats press a lever when a green light is on, they receive a food pellet as a reward. But when they press the lever when a red light is on, they receive a mild electric shock. So, as a result, they learn to press the lever when the green light is on and avoid the red light. Reinforcement. Reinforcement is any event that strengthens or increases the behavior it follows. There are two kinds of reinforcements. In both of these cases of reinforcement, the behavior increases. So first one is the positive reinforcement, adding something positive to increase a response. So positive reinforcers are favorable events or outcomes that are presented after the behavior. So in positive reinforcement situations, a response or behavior is strengthened by the addition of praise or a direct reward. So if you do a good job at work and your manager gives you a bonus, that bonus is a positive reinforcer. Next one is the negative reinforcement. So taking or removing something negative away to increase response. So negative reinforcement or negative reinforcers involve the removal of an unfavorable events or outcomes after the display of a behavior. In these situations, a response is strengthened by the removal of something considered unpleasant. So for example, if your child starts to scream in the middle of a restaurant but stops once you hand them a treat, your action lead to the removal of the unpleasant condition, negatively enforcing your behavior, not your child's. Now let's proceed to the punishments in operant conditioning. Punishment is the presentation of an adverse event or outcome that causes a decrease in the behavior it follows. So there are two kinds of punishments. Okay, so first one is the positive punishment. Adding a negative consequences after an undesired behavior is emitted to decrease future responses. So positive punishment, sometimes called punishment by application. It presents an unfavorable event or outcome to weaken the response it elicits. So it sounds like an oxymoron, but in this instance, positive doesn't mean good. Instead, it suggests that something is added to the situation to act as a punisher. So spanking for misbehavior is an example of punishment by application or positive punishment. The next one is the negative punishment. Taking away or removing a certain desired item
after the undesired behavior happens to decrease future responses. So, negative punishment, also known as punishment by removal, occurs when a favorable event or outcome is removed after a behavior occurs. Taking away a child's video game following misbehavior is an example of a negative punishment. A table or a picture of the negative punishment and positive punishment, and also the positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So in here, as you can see, in positive reinforcement, we add something pleasant like a cookie to increase the likelihood of a behavior. So if reinforcement is negative, we still want to increase the desired behavior. This time by removing something unpleasant like the leash. So in positive punishment, we add an unpleasant response to decrease behavior. So when punishment is negative, we also want to decrease the behavior now by removing something pleasant like the comfy carpet. Now let's talk about the social cognitive theory by Albert Bandura. People acquire behaviors through observation of others, then imitate what they have observed. Vicarious consequences. So, in social learning theory, introduced by psychologist Albert Bandura, proposed that learning occurs through observation, imitation, and modeling, and is influenced by factors such as attention, motivation, attitudes, and emotions. So the theory accounts for the interaction of environmental and cognitive elements that affect how people learn. So the theory suggests that learning occurs because people observe the consequences of other people's behaviors. Bandura's theory moved beyond behavioral theories, which suggests that all behaviors are learned through conditioning, and cognitive theories, which considered psychological influences such as attention and memory. So according to Bandura, people observe behavior either directly through social interactions with others or indirectly by observing behaviors through media. Actions that are rewarded are more likely to be imitated, while those that are punished are avoided. So during the first half of the 21st century, the behavioral school of psychology became a dominant force. The behaviorists proposed that all learning was a result of direct experience with the environment through the processes of association and reinforcement. Bandura's theory believed that direct reinforcement could not account for all types of learning. Okay, so for example, children and adults often exhibit learning for things with which they have no direct experience. Even if you have never swung a baseball bat in your life, you would probably know what to do if someone handed you a bat and told you to try to hit a baseball. This is because you have seen others perform this action either in person or on television. So Bandura's research demonstrated that when children watch models get punished for a behavior, they are less likely to engage in that behavior. And when children watch models get rewarded for a behavior, and when children watch models get rewarded for a behavior, they are more likely to engage in that certain behavior. Now let's talk about the phases of observable or observational learning. First, here we have the attention. Mere exposure does not ensure acquisition of behavior. So attention, in order to learn, you need to be paying attention. So anything that distracts your attention is going to have a negative effect on observational learning. So if the model is interesting or there is a novel aspect of the situation, you are far more likely to dedicate your full attention. Next, we have the retention. Reproduction of the desired behavior implies that students symbolically retains that observed behavior. So the ability to store information is also an essential part of the learning process. Retention can be affected by a number of factors, but the ability to pull up information later and act on it is vital to observational learning. Next, we have the motor reproduction. After observation, physical skills and coordination are needed for reproduction of the behavior learned. So once you have paid attention to the model and retained the information, it is time to actually perform the behavior you observed. Further practice of the learned behavior leads to improvement and skill advancement. Okay, and the last one would be motivation process. Although observer acquires and retains ability to perform the model behavior, there will no overt performance unless conditions are favorable. So in motivation, finally, for observational learning to be successful, you have to be motivated to imitate the behavior that has been modeled. Reinforcement and punishment play an important role in motivation. While experiencing these motivators can be highly effective, so can observing others experiencing some type of reinforcement or punishment. So, for example, if you see another student rewarded with extra credit for being to class on time, you might start to show up a few minutes early each day. Okay, so there are four phases of observational learning. So for they are ARMM, or attention, retention, motor reproduction, and motor motivation, or the motivation process. So people can learn through observation. And one of the best known experiments in the history of psychology involved a doll named Bobo. So Bandura demonstrated that children learn and imitate behaviors they have observed in other people. The children in Bandura's studies observed an adult acting violently toward a Bobo doll. When the children were later allowed to play in a room with a Bobo doll, they began to imitate the aggressive actions they had previously observed. And Bandura, he identified three basic models for observational learning. So the first one is real life, or it involves an actual individual demonstrating or acting out a behavior. Next is the symbolic, and it involves real or fictional characters displaying behaviors in books, films, television programs, or online media. And the last one is the representational. It involves descriptions and explanations of a behavior. So as you can see, observational learning does not even necessarily require watching another person to engage in an activity. Hearing verbal instructions, such as listening to a podcast, can lead to learning. We can also learn by reading, hearing, or watching the actions of characters in books and film. So it is this type of observational learning that has become a lightning rod for controversy, as parents and psychologists debate that the impact of the pop culture media has on kids. Many worry that kids can learn bad behaviors such as aggression from violent video games, movies, television programs, and online videos. Cognitivism. The cognition paradigm essentially argues that the black box of the mind should be open and understood. So the cognitivist revolution replaced behaviorism in 1960s as the dominant paradigm. Cognitivism focuses on the inner mental activities. Opening the black box of the human mind is valuable and necessary for understanding how people learn. Mental processes such as thinking, memory, knowing, and problem solving need to be explored. Knowledge can be seen as a schema or symbolic mental constructions, and learning is defined as change in a learner's schemata. A response to behaviorism, people are not programmed animals that merely respond to environmental stimuli. People are rational beings that require active participation in order to learn and whose actions are a consequence of thinking. Changes in behavior are observed but only as an indication of what is occurring in the learner's head. Cognitivism uses the metaphor of the mind as computer. Information comes in, is being processed, and leads to certain outcomes. Ecological Theory by Uri Bronfenbrenner, a child's development within the context of the system of relationships that form his or her environment, also called as bioecological theory. So Bronfenbrenner's ecological model is a framework that can be utilized to understand the complex systems that influence human development. In particular, this model emphasizes the importance of environmental factors and social influences in shaping development and behavior. The model takes a holistic approach, suggesting that child development involves a dynamic interaction between environment, societal, biological, and psychological factors. So in Bronfenbrenner's model, there is a reciprocal interplay between the individual and the various levels of influence that affect the development. Now let's proceed to the social levels or systems. There are 5 ecological systems in Bronfenbrenner's model. So, the 5 main elements of Bronfenbrenner's theory are microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, and chronosystem. So you can visualize the framework by imagining the individual at the center of the circle, surrounded by 5 concentric rings starting with the first circle, the microsystem, then expanding outward to the outermost circle, which is the chronosystem. Now let's dig deeper on what are these systems. First, we have the microsystem. It's the layer closest to the child and contains the structures with which the child has direct contact. So the microsystem is the innermost level, composed of an individual's immediate environment. It includes the people the person interacts with daily, including their family members, friends, classmates, teachers, and others. So the microsystem has the most direct, immediate impact on the individual. So the relationship and interaction within the microsystem are also bidirectional. People are influenced by their close contacts, but they also affect the people and environment around them. Because of these relationships, close direct nature, they have a powerful effect on shaping an individual's development and behavior. So personal characteristics including mental abilities, physical attributes, temperament, and personality also impact a person's development. Next, we have the mesosystem. It provides the connection between the structures of the child's microsystem. So the mesosystem is the next level of the model. It comprised of all the relationships and interactions between the microsystems. So, for example, examples of mesosystems in a child's life include the interactions between their family and school or between their friends and family. Like the microsystem, the mesosystem has a direct effect on the individual. The different microsystems are connected at this level. This means that changes in one microsystem can then impact other microsystems. So, in other words, how these elements interact can influence how a child's develop. For example, a child's family and school interaction can impact learning and academic performance. Next, we have the exosystem. Defines the larger social system in which the child does not function directly, has an indirect impact on the child's development because of the connection with the family unit. So the exosystem, it refers to environments in which the individual is not an active participant but still impacts development. This level encompasses the social context in which a person lives and other aspects of the environment, including government policies, social services, community resources, and mass media. So the individual does not have direct contact with these influences, but they still shape how a child develops. For example, government policies and community resources impact a child's access to healthcare, quality childcare, and also education. Next, we have the macro system, the outermost layer in the child's environment. So, the macro system involves the broader society and cultural forces that contribute to individual development. Important components of this level of Bronfenbrenner's theory includes values, social norms, customs, traditions, ideology, and cultural beliefs. So these cultural beliefs are often shared by groups of people with a similar history or identity. Such beliefs can also shift over time. It can also vary based on geographical location and socio-economic status. So the last one is the chronos system. Encompasses the dimension of time as it relates to child's environment, the social historical time frame in which the child's life is set. So the chronos system is the outermost level of the model, accounting for the role that time plays in influencing individual development. This includes personal experiences that occur over the course of life, the various life transitions that people experience, historical events, and societal changes, challenges, and transitions that can affect development, including the birth of siblings, moving to a new place, parental divorce, and the death of family members can affect the family's dynamic or structure. So the model recognizes that environments are not static. They change over time, and these changes can have a significant effect on how people develop. Now let's proceed to meaningful learning. by David Osbel, and it is also known as subsumption theory. So, David Osbel was an American psychologist who made significant contributions to the fields of educational psychology, cognitive science, and science education learning, specifically through his research on meaningful learning and advanced organizers. So, according to David Osbel, meaningful learning is learners make sense of their surroundings by integrating new knowledge with that which they have already learned. So, Osbel's theory also focuses on meaningful learning, or according to his theory, to learn meaningfully, individual must relate new knowledge to relevant concepts that they already know. New knowledge must interact with a learner's knowledge structure. Meaningful learning also involves recognition of the links between concepts and can be contrasted with rote learning, which may incorporate new information into the pre-existing knowledge structure but without interaction. Now let's talk about the advanced organizer. First, we have the derivative subsumption. It describes the situation in which the new information pupils learn is an instance or example of a concept that pupils have already learned. So, in derivative subsumption occurs when new information is added to an existing idea, expanding its depth and detail. Think of it like adding a new chapter to a book. So, for example, if you already know that plants need water, you can learn that they also need minerals and sunlight, which deepens your understanding of how plants grow. So the new information is linked to an already existing concept, making it more specific and detailed. So in this way, your prior knowledge is extended rather than radically changed. Next one is the correlative subsumption. To accommodate new information, you have to alter or expand your concept. So in correlative subsumption, it happens when new knowledge concepts new knowledge connects to previously unrelated ideas. It's like a bridge between two separate islands of information. So, for example, if you already know about how plants need sunlight and you learn that photosynthesis is the process by which plants convert sunlight into energy, the new information directly connects with and enriches your previous understanding. It doesn't just extend the old knowledge, but it also creates relationships between different ideas, forming a more complex web of understanding. Next one is the superordinate learning. In this case, you already know a lot of examples of the concepts, but you did not know the concept itself until it was taught to you. So in superordinate learning, it established ideas and then recognized it as more specific examples of new idea and linked it to another one or to another idea. So superordinate idea, let's call it letter A. So superordinate A defined by a new set of critical attributes that encompass the subordinate ideas. The last one is the combinatorial learning. It is a process by which the new ideas is derived from another idea that comes from his previous knowledge. So in combinatorial learning, new idea A is seen as related to existing ideas B and C and also the idea D, but is neither more inclusive nor more specific than ideas B, C, and D. In this case, new idea A is seen to have some criterial attributes in common with pre-existing ideas. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you to another reporter for that will talk about Richard Atkinson and Richard Sifrin's information processing theory.
Good day, everyone. I am Mary Jane Hapal, and today I will be first talking about Richard Atkinson's and Richard Sifrin's information processing theory. So, what is information processing theory? So, the information processing theory explains how we learn, similar to how a computer processes information. So, it has three main steps. First, we have encoding. So, it's taking in new information. So, imagine you're reading a book or listening to a lesson. So, your brain takes in that information, just like a computer receiving data. So, second is storage. It is keeping that information in our memory. So, your brain saves this information like a file on your laptop. Some things will go into short-term memory, while others, just like important facts, get stored in long-term memory. So third and the last is retrieval. So it is bringing back stored information when needed. So later, when you need that information like answering a test question or recalling a fun fact, you can retrieve it just like opening a save file. Now let's talk about the stages of human memory. But first, what is memory? So memory is the ability to store information so that it can be used at a later time. So there are stages of human memory. So it explains how we process and store information. So first we have here the sensory memory. So this is like a quick snapshot. So your brain briefly holds an exact copy of what you see, hear, or feel, but only for a short time. So if you don't pay attention, the information disappears. So next we have the short-term memory. So if you focus on something, it moves into short-term memory. So this is where your brain holds information for a little while as you actively use it. So just like remembering a phone number before dialing. Next and last is the long-term memory. So the important information gets stored here permanently. So this is where knowledge, experiences, and skills are kept so that you can recall them later. So repeating or practicing something helps move it from short-term to long-term memory. Now let's talk about the causes of forgetting. But first, what is forgetting? So forgetting is the inability to recall. So forgetting happens for different reasons. So first, we have the retrieval failure. So forgetting is due to the inability to recall information. So the information is in your memory, but you can't recall it at the moment. So just like a word on the tip of your tongue. You can't recall it, but it's in your tongue. So next we have the decay theory. So information stored in long-term memory gradually fades when not in use. So memories fade over time if they are not used. So just like an old photos becoming blurry. Next is the interference theory. So forgetting long-term memory is due to the influence of other learning. But what is interference first? So it is an act or an instance of hindering, obstructing, or impeding. So it blocks the information like when new or old memories mix up. It makes it hard to remember things clearly, like when learning a new language affects your recall of an old one. So if forgetting is the inability to recall, retention on the other hand is the ability to recall or recognize what has been learned or experienced. Then we also have types of transfer. So transfer refers to when something previously learned influences the new material. So the first type of transfer is internal transfer. So this happens when a person can perform a new task that is at the same level as what they already know. So for example, if a student learns to solve math problems using addition, they can later solve similar problems with different numbers without learning new techniques. Next, we have the vertical transfer. So this occurs when a person moves on to more advanced or complex skills based on what they previously learned. So for example, if a student learns a basic addition, they can later use that knowledge to understand multiplication, since multiplication builds on addition. Next, we have the specific transfer. So it happens when the person applies a learned skill or fact or rule in a similar situation. So for example, if a student learns how to solve a specific type of algebra equation in class, they can later solve a similar equation in a test. Next and last is the general transfer. It happens when a person applies a learned principle to different or new situation. So, for example, if a student develops critical thinking skills in history class, they might use the same skills to analyze problems in science or daily life. So that was all for the Richard Atkinson's and Richard Schifrin's information processing theory. Now let's go to Robert Gagney's 9 events of instructions. So, Robert Gagney's 9 event of instructions is an effective instruction that must reach beyond traditional learning theories and provide support to transition simple to complex skills, thus using a hierarchical model for learning. So, Gagney proposed that learning happens best through a hierarchical model, where simple skills build up to more complex ones. So here are the 9 events of instructions. First, we have gaining attention or reception. So the first step is to capture learners' focus and prepare them for learning. So the brain is naturally drawn to novelty, curiosity, or challenges. So this step ensures engagement from the start. Next, we have informing learners of the objective or the expectancy. So learners need to know what they need to achieve and why it matters. So this helps them focus on key ideas and understand how the lesson connects to real life. Third is stimulating recall of prior learning or retrieval. So activating prior knowledge helps students connect new information with what they already know, so making learning more effective. Fourth is presenting the stimulus, selective perception. So this is where new content is introduced in an organized and engaging way. So the goal is to present information clearly using various teaching methods like a visual aid, storytelling, or demonstrations. Fifth is to providing learning guidance or semantic encoding. So learners need guidance to understand complex concepts. Teachers provide explanations, examples, analogies, or models to make learning more accessible. Sixth is eliciting performance, responding. So students must actively apply what they have learned. So this ensures that they are processing and practicing the new knowledge. So seventh is providing feedback or the reinforcement. So immediate feedback helps learners correct mistakes and reinforce correct learning. So feedback can be positive reinforcement or corrective guidance. Eighth is assessing performance or retrieval. So the goal is to evaluate if learners have successfully understood the material. So this can be done through formal assessments, quizzes, or practical demonstration. Last but not the least is enhancing retention and transfer or the generalization. So the final step ensures that students can use what they have learned in new situations beyond just the classroom. So, to put it simply, Robert Gagney's 9 events of instruction ensure that learning is structured, engaging, and effective. Each step builds upon the previous one, moving from capturing attention to ensuring students can apply their knowledge in real-world situations. Now let's talk about the humanistic theory. So we have Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But first, who is Abraham Maslow? So Abraham Maslow was a leading humanistic psychologist, third force. He promoted the concept of self-actualization, and he believed that there are 4 types of need that must be satisfied before a person can act unselfishly. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a psychological theory proposed by Abraham Maslow in 1943. So it explains human motivation as a progression through different levels of needs. So Maslow suggested that before a person can focus on personal growth or self-actualization, they must first satisfy more basic needs. The hierarchy is typically represented as a pyramid with 5 levels. So, here is the pyramid of needs. So the needs are arranged in a hierarchical order. So the upward climb is made by satisfying one set of needs at a time. So the hierarchy of needs starts with the physiological needs. So physiological needs are basic. So these are the most essential for survival. So the body will crave food, liquid, sleep, oxygen, sex, freedom of movement, and moderate temperature. So we have an example scenario. So if a hungry student in class may struggle to concentrate because their body prioritizes food over learning. So second, we have safety needs. So people need to feel safe and secure. So safety from physical attack, emotional attack, fatal disease, invasion, or even extreme losses like job, family members, or home and friends. So an example scenario. So if a student lives in a different dangerous environment, they may struggle to focus on schoolwork due to fear or anxiety. Third, we have the love and belonging needs. So humans crave social connections. The love or belongingness needs come into play after physiological and security drives are satisfied. Gratification is a matter of degree rather than either or accomplishment. So we have here the inclusion. So inclusion is being part of a group of colleagues, peers, family, or class. Next is affection. It is love or to be loved. And lastly is control. It is the influence over others and self-care. So fourth is the esteem needs. So people need to feel respected and have self-confidence. So the esteem needs are of 2 types. There's the self-esteem, which is the result of competence or mastery of tasks. There's also the attention and recognition that what come from others. So wanting this admiration is part of what we call what McClelland labels as need for power. So an example scenario of esteem needs is when a students receive praise for their hard work and may feel motivation or motivated to continue succeeding. So the last one is self-actualization. So this is the highest level where a person reaches their full potential. So Maslow described the need for self-actualization as the desire to become more and more of what one is. It is to become everything that one is capable of becoming. So an example scenario of self-actualization is a student who has met all the previous needs can now follow and focus on excelling in their talents such as writing, music, or leadership. So Maslow believed that lower level needs must be satisfied before higher level needs can be pursued. So for example, a person struggling with basic survival like food or safety is unlikely to focus on self-improvement or helping others. So that is all for Group 4, the child and adolescent learners and learning principles. So I do hope that you have learned something from each of the reporters. So thank you so much for watching and listening. Goodbye.